back in the zero interest rate days, a lot of people would, experiment with a lot of things that could potentially add ROI. But one of the biggest challenges today in selling is how you're not just competing with other tools within your competitive landscape, but you're actually competing with every single other priority that your customer could have, right? So how do you end up being the first priority for your customer in today's landscape? Would love to hear you both about that.
So, Rishi, you want me to start? Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I think you don't have to take the obvious. So you have to bring value, but value is not just, and as we said, it's not just ROI. Value is something that really connects to the deeper pain of the customer. You really need to understand, dig into the deeper pain. I think we're going into basics, right? And it all goes into basics for MEDDPICC as well. It all interconnects, but you really need to understand what drives the customer, and not just the extra and zero interest rates. You would have told the customer, we're going to give you 2-3% uplift. It's going to be amazing, or we're going to drive you. It's not enough today. It has to connect into what else is your pain. Are you also losing money, or what else is what is also your personal interest as the buyer? Will this impact your position in the company? Will this contribute to make you a stronger player in the company? So there's different factors, and I think this is where it lies in.
Absolutely agree with that. There's a saying which is people only care about themselves, their money, and then their company, right? Would you say that's true?
Probably yes, to be honest. Probably yes. Though they're not switching companies as often as the zero interest days, but yeah, today definitely.
So how can you kind of like play within any sales framework or methodology in a way that you can hit those three different elements to make sure that you can progress a deal faster within that prioritization objective?
My opinion, I think that we're going back to the basics of sales. I think if before we touched and we went through processes, today I think it's super important to connect with the buyer on a personal level, to understand the buyer. As somebody said, if you're not chatting with the buyer on WhatsApp, you're just waiting for Zoom calls, that's not a way to build a sale. If you don't have his personal number, that's no way to build a sale. That's your only process. Today, you have to understand the buyer. You have to understand his concerns. You have to understand what drives him. You have to map the ecosystem, and you have to connect with him on a personal level. Like the good old days where people used to go door to door and connect with people. I think we're back to those kind of basics. And you have to understand what drives him. What are the motivational aspects that drives him to buy the product? If you're just going to stick into, okay, look, this is an ROI calculator, this is what you're going to preview, you're not going to sell. That's not enough. That worked in zero interest when people had a lot of money and they couldn't care.
Rishi, any thoughts there?
Yeah. I think we, as an industry, things became a little too easy. In regards to how we people were just had stipends in their companies and they could just build in whatever tools and sign up for tools and do PLG models and whatever it may be. And just, I think now over the last several months, we're seeing a lot of these companies starting to do, whether it be layoffs or it be just we're tightening up their balance sheets. They're looking for products that not only solve critical pain points, but two, they get more value out, right? So maybe that's a bundled offering. And so now you're competing not only with a one-on-one competitor, but companies that are offering bundled offerings within your space that maybe have that particular product. And so that requires an ability of understanding their business and how your tool is going to add additional value above and beyond not only your competitors, but possible companies that may be offering bundled offerings as well. Or could be indirect competitors to your product. So really taking it to a jobs to be done almost like framework on what your product is actually solving within that business, and then taking it into overall framework of how you can sell to that target customer.
Cool. So kind of the big conclusions that I'm drawing out of this is that one should basically understand not only how to drive ROI, but also or show ROI, death to the ROI calculator hashtag, but also how can you mitigate risk not only for the company, but more importantly for your prospective buyer, and how can you make them shine more for their in front of their bosses or their leadership, right? In addition to obviously driving value, which is kind of has become table stakes today. So I want to dig a little deeper there. When you're trying to assess all these different elements, how do you guys go about scoring where we are in each of these elements throughout the deal and how to make them progress?
So in the past, I used to score all of those elements before because I thought it's going to be like a mathematical formula where it's going to help me to understand if I do progress in the deal or not. Most recently, I found that even if I do tick, or it's also gives you an analogy to what I said before. Even if you tick the boxes of scoring those stages or the elements that comprise this, not necessarily nowadays where we're not in zero interest days, I hope, and it's not going to be happening very soon. I don't find it that helpful. I would be more focused today on trying to understand what's going to not make the deal happen instead of just scoring what's going to make the deal happen. So I'm more scared about what might prevent the deal from, and not what I did right. Okay, just trying to understand what are going to be I'm paranoid. I became paranoid instead of just scoring what are the factors going to help me, or if I take those factors, if I give a good scoring to the things that I've done to get the deal. So instead of being optimistic, I'm being cautious today and trying to build scenarios which are going to prevent me, understand what is going to prevent me from not getting the deal.
I love it. So as much as you're mitigating risk for your customer, you're also mitigating risk for yourself on your own deal, right?
Exactly.
Which is that makes a ton of sense. Rish, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one thing I do have a counter that I would make. I think when you are in the early stages of the company, I think there is value to scoring as you are going through the deal, because you're still understanding the market, you're still understanding where the probabilities, and it just gives you the self-assessment. So when you're going through that process, I think it is helpful to take in that data. But once you kind of establish company with the sales process in place, I agree. Right now, it's more about understanding what's going to push that, getting that institutional knowledge that you did previously, learn through the scoring, and then moving forward. So that's the only difference.
Is as a young startup, you don't really have any moat, right? You just have a wedge into the market and you exploit that wedge with as much speeds and depth as possible until you get to product market fit. Then you leverage that product market fit for quick distribution, and that distribution ends up being a first moat into the market, because for your customers to switch platforms, there have to be a 10x or at least 5x better alternative, right? Once you have a strong customer base, from there you start doubling down on network effects, thinking about how you can optimize the experience across all of your customers in a way that it almost makes no sense for them to switch platforms. I would say the fourth step is building kind of distribution across partners, channel partners, because at that point you start having a lot of visibility and you start becoming almost a little bit untouchable. And the last one is kind of like big data as a moat. How can you leverage all the data that you have to build a product that even the 10th version of GPT or the, you know, the smartest machine learning engineers in the world might not be able to replicate because of how much data and specific industry and functional models you have within your product, right? And all of that you have, it's threading the needle between this and the fact that you need to keep an agile organization and minimize admin paperwork and hoops to get any additional iteration. One thing that my dad told me was, hey, do you know what CEO stands for? And I was like, yeah, Chief Executive Officer. And he's like, no, it's customers, employees, owners. So first of all, you always have to think in that way. If you treat them in that specific order, you'll have the owners who are the last letter that will be very happy. So always think, first of all, about what makes your customers the happiest and what drives the most long time revenue. And I insist on the long time word because it's not just about making a quick win, but long-term recurring revenue. So if this means that you have to prioritize a feature or a product because this is what's going to drive your biggest customer to retain, or a new big logo to gain, that will actually impact, you know, your sales, get you to get a lot newer logos, you have to prioritize that, right? And it's always a game of prioritization in terms of what will help us get the most recurring long-term revenue as possible. That's just how I see it.